After my third place finish for 88,000 Canadian in the Montreal WPT event, which was highlighted in the previous two vlogs, I'm up over $80,000 on the year through May. The tournament heater continues at the start of the World Series of Poker. I make back-to-back online final tables, almost winning a circuit ring and a gold bracelet in the same day, but unfortunately, I end up getting 6th in each event and don't quite get the hardware or as big a scores as I was hoping. But the tournament success I've had over the last 2.5 years has me motivated to go harder than I've ever gone before. I always give Instagram and Twitter updates during the summer because I'm playing way too much poker to make vlogs highlighting each tournament, and people tend to want to follow along with deep runs right as they're happening anyway. The runouts aren't too kind to me during the WSOP, especially when I have kings for some reason. I got this one in with my friend pre-flop versus ace-10 offsuit. We flopped a set versus his top pair, then he goes runner full house. Losing a couple hands like this every once in a while is pretty palatable, particularly after running well in tournaments for a while, but when nearly every day I show up, miss time with my son, and get coolered in big spots while simultaneously losing several $1,000 buy-ins, it takes its toll mentally. I have one of the worst runs of live poker that I've ever had. It just seems like each time that I get it in during key moments, people are getting whatever they need to either double up or knock me out. Not a good start.
Overkill.
Pretty good flop.
All right.
Send me that video.
Don't think I need. I'm deleting it right now. Sorry. A few weeks in, I write myself a note to boost morale because I'm feeling pretty low. Typically, I don't like sharing things quite this personal, but maybe it'll be beneficial for some of you who are also going through tough times in poker to see that it happens to everyone. I finally break a 1 for 21 streak, making day 2 and the money of a 3,500 event at Win, where playing poker is way more enjoyable, but I'm not able to run too deep in that either. The main thing that isn't completely shattering my confidence is that I continue to do well online. I cashed in some of the largest buy-in bracelet events, getting 23rd in the online 3,200, then in the 5,300, I get 10th for 16,000. It would have been cool to get 8th or better because they paused the tournament to play out the 8-handed final table live, and I could have invited friends and family out to the rail to watch me compete for a couple $100,000. The 5K had a ridiculously tough field with tons of world-class talent. It's bittersweet to get 10th. When you make it that far out of 267 entries, battle hard in high-stress situations, then come up just short of a $6,000 pay jump and just short of another final table competing for a bracelet, right as all the pay jumps are getting really massive, it's tough not to feel a bit disappointed with the result. If I could have outlasted 6 more players, I'd have gotten 6 times as much money and a 6-figure plus payout. The hand I busted on was, of course, with the jiggities. At the end of summer, I start getting on the board a little more in live events, continuing to do it in small to medium buy-in tournaments, but it's just not nearly enough to make up for a handful of large buy-in events that I play, including 4 live 10K bullets that I sold some action for, and a WPT 25K that I sold a significant portion of myself for. I also played 2 online 10Ks in July that I brick to go on nearly $100,000 downswing, bringing me to be about even on the year before a slight uptick close out the tournament season, showing only a $20,000 profit for the first half of 2024. While it's easy to get down on myself and feel dumb for playing so many events and losing $100,000 in a few months, it's important to realize that's just the nature of tournaments. They're extremely high variance with a lot of risk and huge reward if things go well. You may have caught at the end of the note I wrote myself where I said to zoom out and enjoy the view. When we do that on the tournament graph, we see that over the last 2.5 years since I started playing a lot more events, I'm still up over $500,000, running insanely well over a relatively small sample. And even though I lost what seems like a lot of money in a short period of time, if I had 1 or 2 more things go my way in the 5K where I got 10th, or a few other events where I got in the top 25, I could have had a break even or possibly really profitable few months. That's just how the game goes. Anyway, now that we're caught up on me getting crushed over summer, I'm very much looking forward to shifting the focus back to cash games. Our lodge ownership group expanded to a second location, taking over what used to be Rounders in San Antonio. Andrew and I did a few meetup games for the same club starting in 2019. It's amazing to come back now as part owner. I'm immediately excited to see it and get to know the players and the staff better. The first night I play, I hop into the 1-2 game that has a $300 max buy-in. Even with the cap, there's potential to make a lot of money. On bullet number 1 at our newest club, I run the 300 up to about 1,800. People are straddling and double straddling, so it plays big and there's tons of action. I lose a little back, to ultimately end up profiting $11.80, which isn't bad for a small stakes game. The next day I buy in for $5,000 to play the uncapped 1025 game that runs twice a week. It's my first high stakes session in a long time. I'm a bit rusty, but should be fun to play with this group. I imagine it'll play bigger and bigger as the day goes on, so I intend to add more chips to the stack, especially if things don't go well initially. Hopefully I'll run decent from the start though, so I can chip away at the tournament deficit that I've accumulated over the last few months. We begin the session at 3:09 p.m. A few minutes in, we pick up ace-king suited in the under-the-gun straddle. A player in middle position raises to 150. I like it. The small blind likes it as well. He 3-bets to 350. It's a tiny sizing. The opponent started with less than 3,000, so he doesn't have a large stack. Folding's out of the equation. Jamming isn't all that unreasonable. If we get through the middle position player, the shove would only be for 2870 effective. But there's a chance that one or even both players could have us beat. I go with the cold 4-bet to 850 to ensure that the initial pre-flop raiser doesn't get a chance to come in behind us while getting a great price if we just call the 350. The middle position player folds. If the small blind jams, we'll be getting it in against him. Instead, the small blind only calls. He might have the same hand as us, or something like ace-queen suited, pocket queens, or pocket jacks. There's also a chance that he's slow playing aces. The flop comes queen-jack 4 with 2 diamonds. It's the wrong Broadway cards and the wrong suit. The only thing we have going for us is that we've got a straight draw and 2 overs. The small blind checks. I'm not going to check back and give up very often after 4-betting pre-flop. I go with a small sizing of 450. We risk very little to maybe get ace-king to fold a chop. If the opponent has a set, he might just call. Then if the turn isn't a 10, we can check back at that point to possibly see a river for free, so the small bet potentially allows us to see 2 more cards for just 450 total. No matter what, it's looking bleak for us though. The small blind snap jams for 2020. I knew there was a possibility of that happening. We won't be seeing 2 more cards after all. I fold.
You win.
Very bad flops for me.
We have, jacks? I'll put you on jacks right now.
We're pretty close.
Next, we're dealt king-jack offsuit in the cutoff. The straddle's on every hand, so we're playing 10-25-50. The hijack limps in. It's always a great sign when you see open limping. It's rare that it happens in a high-stakes game like this one, so I'm happy about it. I raised to 200 in order to isolate the opponent in position. The button's going to spoil our plan. He calls. The under-the-gun straddler calls as well. The hijack is going rogue with his strategy. He 3-bets to 450. This is such a strange move that accomplishes very little. Sometimes you see this type of thing in small stakes games where the opponent limp raises with aces, but this is a terrible time to 3-bet tiny because no one's going to fold for 250 more. The hijack is going to have multiple opponents, and he's going to be playing from out of position against 2 of us. I suspect that we don't have the best hand, but we're getting 4-1. I call. The button is getting an even better price than us. He calls. As expected, the under-the-gun straddler calls as well. We're going 4 ways to the flop. It comes queen-jack 6 rainbow. We've got second pair and a backdoor straight draw. Under-the-gun checks. I'm not sure what's going on, but the hijack down bets at 225 into a pot with more than 1,800 in it. This is where you're at a pretty big disadvantage when you're the new player in a game like this and aren't familiar with the weird betting patterns that some of the opponents might have. I'm not folding though. I call, even though there's a good chance that if the hijack doesn't have us beat, that the button or under the gun still might have a better hand. The button calls, which is too bad because I was hoping to play this heads up in position. Under the gun folds. We're down to 3 players. The turn is the 5 of hearts. It's a blank. The hijack didn't like getting called in 2 spots on the flop. He comes to his senses and checks. Get into showdown with second pair cheaply is our goal. I check. The button isn't going to allow anyone to see a free river card. He isn't going to make the price very high either though. He bets 400. Be sure to come out to the lodge in San Antonio because you can't beat the prices people will give you. The hijack folds, indicating that he definitely didn't limp 3-bet with aces pre-flop. I have no idea what he had. I don't have any idea what's happening at all. I don't feel like we're best, but I don't have it in me to let go in case we're up against something like Jack 10 or Jack 9 suited that's putting in a small bet now with plans to take control and check back river. If we're up against a queen, maybe we can hit another jack or king. I call to advance to the river. The dealer puts out the 8 of spades. 10-9 makes a straight. I check. The opponent isn't going to bet anymore. He checks back. Our jack might just be best to win a big pot. It isn't though. The button tables ace-jack offsuit. He's got us notched.
Nice hand, nice hand. It's a very bizarre hand.
Everything works out as well as possible for the button if the hijack raised initially rather than open limp, or if he 3-bet to a real sizing pre-flop, or if he bet an actual amount on the flop, then we easily could have gotten away from king-jack offsuit at any of those points. Instead, a strange sequence of events happens, causing us to kinda lose the maximum with second pair. I'm happy to add on for 5,000 more, we're in for 10,000 total, and already stuck several thousand. One thing I love about our new club is that the restaurant here has some great food options. I get the salmon that comes with 2 sides, it's delicious, but my favorite part about the meal might be the creamed corn. It's good to get some food in my stomach because I plan on being here a while. It's almost 2 hours in when we pick up ace-5 of hearts in middle position. I haven't won a single hand yet, not even the blinds. I'm currently losing over $5,000 just running extremely cold. I raised to 150 with hopes of turning things around. The hijack, cutoff, and under the gun straddle are all call. We're going 4 ways to the flop. It comes ace-8-5 with 2 diamonds. We've got top and bottom pair. Under the gun checks. With multiple opponents and multiple draws out there, we can't bet too small. I grab some black chips to wager 400. The hijack apparently didn't connect. He takes one last look at his cards before he folds. The cutoff follows suit. He pretty quickly folds as well. The player in the straddle may have a piece of the board. Perhaps he's got an ace or maybe a draw of some sort. He calls. It's down to heads up. The turn is the 9 of spades, completing the most obvious straight draw, putting a second flush draw on the board, and making it so ace-9 combos steal the lead from us. It isn't a great card, but it's better than seeing the 9 of diamonds. Under the gun checks. We're probably best, but I don't want this pot to get too big relative to our hand strength. I check back for pot control and a bit for deception. We might be able to induce a bluff from missed draws on the river. The dealer puts out the deuce of clubs. It's as blank as it gets. Under the gun checks. We almost definitely have the best hand. We're going to win our first pot of the day. The opponent probably has one pair of some sort or a missed draw. We can't get paid by missed draws. I target top pair holdings with a big overbet of 2,000. After we check back the turn, this looks totally fishy, like we're making a last-ditch effort to buy the pot. There's no way the deuce helped us, and the opponent knows it. I wouldn't have bet on the flop into 3 opponents with pocket deuces, so what did I check back the turn with that I all of a sudden am confident enough to fire big on the river with for value? These are the thoughts that have to be running through the opponent's mind as he considers his options. He's a good thinking player who I'm hoping will level himself into a call with something even as light as a pair of 8s or 9s. Under the gun thinks better of it and folds. For the first time today, we see a pot pushed in our direction. We've got some work to do just to get back to even. It'd be nice to see more of that soon. 10 minutes later, we pick up pocket 9s in the under the gun straddle. A player in middle position raises to 150. The big blind calls. We've got a strong hand that plays well multi-way. I call for 100 more. We're going 3 ways to the flop. It comes king-king-6 rainbow. 2 kings out there seem bad for us, but it's actually better than 1 king. When half the kings are accounted for, rather than just one of them, it reduces the amount of combos containing top pair that our opponents will have. Also, if we're up against trips, and we happen to hit a 9 at some point, there's a good chance that we can win a significantly larger pot because people don't like folding 3 of a kind. The big blind checks. I check to the pre-flop aggressor. He goes to his stack knowing that his range will have a high concentration of good hands on a paired flop like this. He bets 200. The big blind folds. When the middle position player bets into 2 players, it's more likely that he's got something strong, but it's too early for us to fold. I call to see what develops. The turn is another 6, pairing the board. It'll generally be a better card for us when we defend our straddle because we'll have more 6s in our range than our opponent. I check. Whether he continues betting or not will be really telling. If he bets, he's saying that he's not worried about the possibility of us having 6s full of kings, in addition to the possibility of us having kings full of 6s. He checks back, indicating that he's worried about something. He might just have ace high. Feels like our 9s are best. The river is the 3 of spades. It's a blank. If we check, the opponent will probably check back again. I try to extract a little extra value out of him with a small bet of 300. In addition to ace high hands, we can likely get called by pocket 8s and 7s. Occasionally, the opponent will have queens through 10s to beat us, but if we check, he might bet more than 300 with those hands, and we'd feel obligated to call just to lose more in those instances anyway. The opponent snap calls, which is scary. Our pair of 9s is enough to win it though. The opponent mucks face down. We do well to get an extra few hundred on the river to win only our second hand of the session. Nothing's come too easy so far. Here we've got the jiggities in middle position. Under the gun +2 limps in for 50. We're not going to allow people to see a flop for $50. I raise to 200. The big blind calls. The under the gun straddler 3 bets to 800. He's only got 35 total in his stack. Under the gun +2 folds. Obviously, Under the gun could have us beat, but it was set up well for him to go for a squeeze. He knows that I could be raising to 200 with a wide range to isolate the limper like I did earlier with King Jack offsuit. I'd certainly fold a hand like that to 800, but we're close to the top of our range. I'm not folding jacks. The opponent could definitely have a hand like ace 5 suited, queen 10 suited, or even ace king that we're flipping with. I don't want to call and allow the big blind to come in when he'd be getting over 3-1. If the big blind had us beat, he would have 3-bet rather than call or raise, so I'm not too concerned about him, even though he has us covered. I'm going to play this aggressively.
I don't have enough other shit, so you can just bag the
The big blind folds quickly. Under the gun calls. We're playing a big all-in pot with over 7,000 in the middle. When we get called quickly like that, we're either up against ace-king, aces, kings, or pocket queens. We're flipping with 16 combos of ace-king, and we're a big underdog to the remaining 18 combos of pocket pairs that have us completely dominated. The flop comes queen 7-6 with 2 spades. Doesn't change much because we're still beating ace-king and still losing to the other high pairs. The turn is the 9 of diamonds. It's a brick in this instance. The river is the 3 of diamonds. We do great to fade aces and kings on the board. Probably a big reason why we didn't see any of those come out is because Under the Gun is holding 2 kings in his hand to win a large pot and double up through us. It's like we've got a T Swift album on. The hits just keep on coming. This is a particularly devastating blow that brings our stack down to $1,850. We're stuck over $8,000 at the moment. That's a tough hand, and maybe I should have just flatted the 3-bet after all, or maybe even folded, but the game is still good, so I'm not going anywhere. I add on for 10,000 more, getting it all in a sack of purple $500 chips. We're in for 20,000 with quite a bit to make up if we want to book a win. I add on for an additional 5,000 to have a certain player at the table covered before we look down at 6-5 of hearts Under the Gun +1. We're now in for 25,000 total, 6 hours into the session. I raised to 150. Generally, folding our hand pre-flop from this position is fine, but there's someone in the blinds that I'm interested in playing a pot with, so I keep the range wide. The button calls. We don't quite get the opponent that we wanted, but we still have plenty of potential with our cards. The flop comes 9-3 deuce rainbow. We've at least got a gutter. This isn't a flop that'll connect all that well with our opening range, but the button isn't going to have a ton of really strong hands either. Maybe he has a set of 9s, but he's not supposed to call pre-flop raises with 3s or deuces. He probably would, but he's theoretically not supposed to. He also won't have aces, kings, or probably even queens, while we will. I bet 150 again. The button should fold plenty of high card combos that are ahead. I don't anticipate getting raised almost ever on such a dry flop because the opponent is in position. If he has a set, he doesn't have to worry about any draws except the rare instances I have ace 4, ace 5, or 6-5 suited like right now. The button surprisingly does raise to 450. Usually if someone has a set, they'll almost always wait until the turn to make a move. This doesn't seem like a play done with 3 of a kind. It seems like a play done with a Jack 10 suited type of hand that can maybe win right now with a bluff raise, but if not, there will be plenty of turns that the button could continue firing on if he picks up a straight and or flush draw. The issue for him is that I see through it. I re-raised to 1300, mostly representing an overpair or ace 9 suited because it isn't very likely that I'd have a set when I 3-bet the flop. The opponent can get into a whose balls are the biggest battle and 4-bet as a bluff, hoping that I'd fold an overpair, but he gives up and folds. He has to see the run out in order to find out if he would have improved. The turn is the queen of hearts, the river is the 8 of clubs. We would have finished with 6 high, our read works out, but I would have liked our play more if we had a backdoor flush draw. It's about 8 hours into the session when we look down at ace 6 suited on the button. You may notice a few of those orange pieces on the table. Those are there because we're playing around at the nit game. If you win a hand, you return the nit buttons back to the dealer. The last person with an orange button has to add $1,000 to the first pot after the game ends, and anyone can win that pot. I'm one of 2 people who hasn't won a pot yet. The only other player with a nit button in front of him is the small blind on our left. I raised to 200 to ideally win pre-flop and not be on the hook to pay $1,000. Small blind calls. He almost is forced to with any 2 cards when we raise. The under the gun straddler calls as well. We're going 3 ways to the flop. It comes queen 9-5 with 2 clubs. We brick it. The opponent's check. I can't let the small blind win the pot. I bet 400. Luckily, the small blind doesn't give us any resistance. He folds quickly, which is a huge win for us already. If under the gun folds, we'll take down the pot and won't have to pay the nit tax. Under the gun is the savvy player who knows that we could be betting with all kinds of garbage in order to win. He's not going to let us have the pot easily. He calls. There are quite a few draws out there, so maybe Under the Gun has one of them, and our ace high is currently best. The turn is the 3 of diamonds. It shouldn't have changed much. Under the gun checks. I'd like to get to showdown with ace high, which has some value. Now that the small blind is out, we don't need to fight as hard for the pot either. I check back. The river is the 9 of spades. It's mostly a good card for us because the draws have all missed, and there's one less 9 that's unaccounted for. The opponent can have all kinds of straight draws, including king jack, king 10, jack 10, jack 8, 10 8, 8 7, 8 6, and 7 6. You can have tons of combos containing missed clubs. You might have even floated the flop with some backdoor draws that also missed. After I checked back the turn, indicating that I don't have a strong hand, the under the gun player is going to feel obligated to bluff a significant percentage of the time if he has air. Ace high could definitely still be best even if we see a bet from the opponent. And we do.
No. No, I told my mom.
You know your mama?
Yeah.
Cool. You win.
Ace high, whoa.
We win not only what's in the middle, but also we avoid losing the Nick game. It's been a tough day, but we're making the most of the situations we're in, thinking things through in order to bluff or make light calls when our opponents aren't likely to be as strong as they're pretending. Just a few hands go by when we pick up ace 6 suited again. This time we've got spades in middle position and the double straddle to 100 is on. I raised to 300. The cutoff is a very aggressive player who's generally thought of as the best in San Antonio. He 3-bets to 900. I don't like folding suited aces, especially against players who I know are capable of 3-betting light at a high frequency. I call to see a flop. It's already a big pot, and we're playing deep, out of position against a talented player. The flop comes ace 8-4 all clubs. This is why folding a hand like ace 6 suited pre-flop to a 3-bet isn't a bad idea because we've got top pair with no clue as to whether or not we're ahead. I check. It's nice to have top pair, but we don't have a club in our hand and could be drawing close to dead if the opponent has something like ace-king with the king of clubs. The cutoff bet's 700. This is a very uncomfortable spot. The opponent's going to be betting pretty much his whole range at some frequency. We can't fold top pair just yet, even though there are tons of bad cards that can come out. We'll worry about that if it happens though. For now, I call to see the turn. The dealer puts out the ace of diamonds. That's not one of those bad cards that I was worried about. It's a big relief to turn trips, reducing the amount of combos we're losing to by a lot. I check. The cutoff should be playing a strategy that might surprise a lot of you. When we run this through GTO Wizard, which I have a link for in the description box below with a discount, we see the cutoff is supposed to check back 74% of the time. He's actually supposed to check back tons of trip ace combos that have us dominated. The only trips combos he's really supposed to be betting is ace-king without a club. The cutoff checks back. There isn't a ton of info that we gained from that since we just saw he can still have us beat a lot of the time. The river is the 3 of diamonds. It's a total blank. I'm not inclined to bet just so that we can get snapped by a better 3 of a kind. I check to open the door for the opponent to bluff with his suited Broadway combos that don't have us beat. The cutoff may even bet a hand like pocket kings for value. Instead, he gives up and checks back. We're happy to turn over the 3 aces. It's going to win it. The cutoff doesn't show what he had. Perhaps it was something like pocket jacks that was too good to bluff with on the river, but not quite good enough to bet for value. As I mentioned earlier, we're in for 25,000 total. This pot is the large one that helps us climb to about 20,000 in chips. We're not too far away from the even mark. Anything can happen late at night when the pots get bigger, the double straddles start getting put out more frequently, and the drinks are flowing. You never know who's going to show up at your table either. At our last meetup game in San Antonio back in 2019, you might remember this part of the vlog when I made a fold after a player named Joey jammed on me.
Alright, man, show the bluff. Go ahead, you win it, man. You win it.
Oh no!
Show the bluff!
He doesn't show and is immediately possessed by some kind of wild squawking bird. That's certainly a moment I won't forget. I've never heard anyone make a noise like that before or since, but maybe we'll get a chance to hear it again tonight as the old nemesis takes a seat at our table. Squawking bird.
Of course.
The return.
Return. Many years later, much more pounds.
It's now past midnight when we're dealt Jack 4 suited and the under the gun straddle. The player in middle position raises to 150. The hijack calls. When we're dealt the suited Robbie, we have no choice but to defend. I call for 100 more. We're going 3 ways to the flop out of position. It's tough to connect all that well with a flop, but it comes 9-8-7 with 2 hearts. We've got a flush draw, gutter, and 1 over. I check. The initial pre-flop raiser checks. The hijack bets 300. There's so many cards that can help us that we don't necessarily need to turn our hand into a bluff, especially when the hijack could have lots of strong hands as well. I call. The middle position player calls pretty quickly. With two opponents, it's tough to feel all that great about having a draw to the jack-high flush draw. It's possible that someone else has better hearts. The turn is the king of clubs, putting a second flush draw on the board. I check, middle position player checks. Even though the hijack got called in 2 spots on the flop, he's still pumping money into the pot. He bets 700. With the half pot sizing, it doesn't feel like he has anything all that close to the nuts. He'd likely bet more with the straight or set. He'd probably bet more if he was purely bluffing as well. Maybe he has something like king 10. We're getting a good price. I call, mostly hoping to hit a straight. If we were facing a larger bet, I'd strongly consider folding since we have no draws to the nuts. After thinking for a while, the middle position player calls once more as well. He doesn't appear to have anything strong at all, but seemingly just doesn't want to let go of his cards when he's closing the action and the pot is big relative to the size of the bet. The river is the 5 of clubs, putting 4 to the straight on board and completing the backdoor flush. We completely brick our combo draw and don't even end up with a pair. We've got no shot at winning this if it gets a showdown, but we're by far the most likely to be holding a 6 in our hand for a straight. We show up in this instance with a 4, for example. We could definitely have some combos containing a backdoor flush also. If our read on the situation is correct, neither of our opponents will have anything all that strong based on the bet size that the hijack chose on the turn and the middle position player's reluctance to call that bet. The board run out to set us up for a nice bluff opportunity. I'm going big to fold out hands as good as 2 pair and sets.
4,000.
I had a very good. Oh shit.
We get a nice overbet bluff through to steal a pot with several thousand in it. We're clawing our way back to even, one high card hand at a time. We've got about 21,000 in front of us. If we can win one more decent pot, we'll get there. It's almost 10 hours into this session when we're dealt king 9 suited in the big blind with a double straddle to 100 on. The cutoff raises to 300. He's the opponent who beat us with kings against our jacks earlier. We have no choice but to get revenge. I 3-bet to 1,500. I haven't been doing much 3-betting today. We should be able to get folds out of a handful of combos that have us dominated, like all offsuit Broadway hands, aside from ace-king and ace-queen. Cutoff calls, we're playing a large pot out of position. If we win this one, there's a good chance that we'll get unstuck. The flop comes 9-8-4 with 2 clubs. We've got top pair, but it's a board that'll often connect well with the cutoff's 3-bet calling range. I'd really like to get to showdown with our pair without playing a massive pot from this point on. I check to see how the opponent wants to proceed. He won't have top set very often, but he can still have sets of 8s, sets of 4s, overpairs, and big combo draws. The cutoff bets 1,000. I like that it's not too large of a bet. The cutoff is being complicit and keeping things reasonable. I call, not knowing exactly where we're at. The turn is the queen of hearts. I don't like this card at all because a lot of suited Broadway combos our opponent will have just improve to take the lead. He'll have hands like jack 10 suited that are now a straight, king queen suited, and even ace queen offsuit. I check. We get some reassurance that we're best as the cutoff checks back. Maybe he's given up on bluffing, or maybe he just paired a queen and is checking for pot control. He likely doesn't have 2 pair or better though. If he did, he would have continued betting. The river is the deuce of diamonds. It's a total blank. I check. The opponent bets. We're gonna have to call with second pair given how we've played this so far and the run out with only 1 over. Probably looks like we've got some high card combination, maybe a pair of queens at best. The cutoff is done playing nice. He bets 3,000. It's an annoying spot, but after playing passively post flop, I'm not getting away. I call suspecting that we're not always gonna win. The cutoff reveals that he hit the 3-outer on the turn.
Queen.
Yeah.
He was drunk.
The cutoff has king queen of spades and immediately improved to take the lead from us after bluffing on the flop. He does well to make the maximum on the river. I'm completely deflated because now I'm back down to the low point on the session with only 15,000 in front of me. I'm stuck 5 figures again, just not able to get all the way out of the hole, and it's a big one. An hour later, we're dealt pocket 3s under the gun +1. I raised to 150. The cutoff calls. The small blind wants to go to war. He 3-bets to 750. We're playing deep. I'm happy to set mine. I call for 600 more to see a flop. The cutoff no longer likes his cards enough to hang in there. He folds. We're heads up in position. The flop comes 7-5 deuce with 2 diamonds. It's a flop that won't be great for the small blind's range after he 3-bets pre-flop because he'll mostly have high cards. The opponent makes a small bet of 500 though. He's done well to run up a big stack. He's by far the biggest winner on the day, often bullying people around. I'm not ready to abort. I call one time with our pair and backdoor straight draw. The turn is the 6 of clubs. A 4 will now give us a straight. The small blind doesn't appear concerned that we'll have anything strong. he bets 1500. He's rarely going to have anything better than one pair. I'd have expected him to check somewhat frequently with hands that have a lot of showdown value. The bet feels like he's trying to muscle us out of the pot, perhaps with a flush draw. Our hand is slightly improved, and I'm not fully buying the small blind story, so I'm not going anywhere just yet. I call, but I'd prefer this pot to not get any bigger. The river is a 7 of spades. It's usually going to be better for us than the opponent. The small blind checks. We can beat all ace-high hands and miss flush draws. I check back. The opponent reveals that he has ace-jack offsuit. He was double-barrel bluffing, gave up on the river. We win a big pot with our baby pocket pair. Getting back to even isn't necessarily the goal anymore since it's so late, but I'm having fun with this group, and maybe we can at least minimize the damage. Next, we're dealt pocket 9s on the button. The double straddle to 100's on. The player who's first to act raises to 300 from the hijack. This is the same player who beat us with king-queen suited against our king-9 suited. He's on tilt because he folded kings face up to a pre-flop shove a bit earlier and was wrong. His opponent showed pocket queens. Everyone except one of us at the table was quite entertained. I call, hoping that we can make our first set of the day. The double straddler also calls. We're going 3 ways to the flop in position. The dealer puts out 6-6-5 rainbow. We don't improve, but we've got an overpair. Under the gun +1 checks. The hijack wants to keep control of the pot. He bets 450. I kind of expected him to check since he won't have many combos containing a 6 in his range, whereas the double straddler will. Betting into 2 opponents on this flop is a strong move. I have to be concerned about both opponents having us beat, but folding an overpair isn't something that we're going to be doing, at least yet. I call. Under the gun +1 folds quickly. I'm glad to see that. It's down to heads up. The turn is the 4 of hearts. It doesn't change much. The opponent isn't deterred by our flop call. He bets 1200. The hands that he's representing are mostly all better than pocket 9s. Today, I haven't had much luck against this particular opponent, but maybe I can change that. I call. There's over 4,000 in the middle. The river is the 8 of diamonds. We're no longer even beating pocket 7s or pocket 8s. We can only beat stone bluffs. The opponent checks. I'm fine taking our hand to showdown. I check back. The opponent isn't quick to reveal his cards. He likely doesn't have a hand that'll win very often. Finally, he shows a queen, then reluctantly shows that his other card is an offsuit jack. We catch him firing 2 barrels at us like he's a giant gorilla and we're a small Italian. We get a nice win to get our stack back up to 20,000. A lot of our money's been recovered. We're still going though. We pick up king-queen offsuit in the under the gun straddle. The hijack raises to 150. The big blind calls. We're closing the action with a strong hand. I call for 100 more. We're going 3 ways to the flop. The dealer puts out king-queen 6 with 2 spades and a club. We've got top 2 pair. It's the best hand that we've had all session. Big blind checks. I check to the pre-flop aggressor. It's the same opponent who tried to bluff us when we called him light to win with ace-6 of hearts earlier. The hijack bets 150. The big blind folds. I consider making a move right now, but we've got the board so covered. If the opponent had a strong draw, he might have bet a larger amount as a semi-bluff. With this sizing, I get the sense that we have him in bad shape. I call for deception. It's down to heads up. The turn is the 8 of spades. It's obviously not great because we're downgraded significantly. I check. Pretty quickly, the opponent decides that he's going to bet. He reaches for chips and fires for a much larger amount of 600. Our hand is under-repped. There's still a good chance that we're best. We're even beating some of the hands that the opponent might be betting for value. Plus, we can improve to a full house. I call with plans of also calling a river bet if the board doesn't change too much. The dealer puts out the 7 of clubs. Some straight draws get there, but that's it. I check. I don't particularly want to see a 3rd barrel from the opponent, especially if he goes with a big sizing because I'll feel obligated to call no matter what. The hijack doesn't care about our feelings. He assembles chips and bets 1,600. We don't really beat much that the opponent would take this line with for value. There are a number of flush, straight, and set combos that have us beat that the opponent's representing. We at least have removal for set combos, but our hand is mostly turned into a bluff catcher. After only check calling on the flop, we can't fold here, even though people rarely bluff big on the river. I call, expecting to donate to the hijack a lot of the time. We won't be doing it this time. He has ace-9 offsuit with the ace of spades. He had removal to both flush and straight combos. We catch him with his hand in the cookie jar again. Our hand is best. We win a very nice pot. The night's winding down, but we're back within reach of the even mark. With our 2 pair holding, we've got almost 23,000 in front of us. This is the closest we've been to even in the last 10 hours. Some of the players are quitters and leave, while a few of us stay to play 4-handed and kick up the blinds at 25.50. It's after 3 a.m. when we're dealt pocket sixes in the big blind. The player first to act raises to 150. His name is Yu Chan. He's the one that I said earlier is considered the best player in San Antonio. We've got a hand that we can go to battle with. I call for 100 more. We're heads up, out of position, still looking to hit our first set of the day. The flop comes ace-5-4 rainbow. We're not able to improve. I check. The opponent's going to have plenty of aces in his range, but this time he checks back. We get to see a free turn card. The dealer puts out the 6 of diamonds. We smash it and finally make a set after more than 12 hours of playing. I set the trap and check. 2 checks in a row looks weak. I'll rarely have a strong hand after taking this line. We get what we wanted. The cutoff bites with a bet of 200. If we're going to make the maximum, we need to build this pot now rather than attempt to go for the check raise on the river. I raise a 600. It should look strange to the cutoff that we're all of a sudden aggressively attacking this pot. He doesn't believe that we've got a hand as strong as we do. He calls for 400 more. The pot's becoming a substantial one. We just need a blank on the river. The dealer puts out the deuce of spades instead. There are 4 to the straight on board, but if we think about it, it shouldn't have changed too much. There aren't that many threes that I expect the opponent to have after he raised pre-flop, checked the flop, then bet on the turn, and called our raise. He's too good to be drawing to the low end of the straight. I'm charging full steam ahead. I go with a large overbet of 2,000. If my assessment of the situation's wrong, then I just torched a couple thousand, but if I'm right, then our set is still best, and if we get called, not only do we win a huge pot, we get completely out of the $10,000 hole that we were in twice. The opponent was at the table when I overbet bluff with Jack-4 hearts on a run out that was good for our straddle defend range. There's a similar spot, except this time we actually have it. There's been no call yet, and the opponent doesn't appear to be contemplating a raise, so we almost for sure have the best hand. A minute goes by, and the opponent still hasn't made a decision. I'm rooting hard for a call. The opponent knows that we're capable of making moves in this spot. He might be considering calling us light because it looks like we're trying to buy it. After a minute and a half, the opponent puts in calling chips. We reveal our turn set of sixes. It takes a few seconds for the cutoff to process what we've got. Then finally, he mucks his cards face down. We make close to the maximum, winning a big pot that allows us, for the first time, to have more money than we started the day with. We barely get over the even mark to get our stack up to about $25,500. Remember, we're in for $25,000 total. It's been a grueling and exhausting 12 and a half hours of play. One other player leaves, with the table being reduced to 3-handed. I sit in for just a few more hands before calling it a night and booking a win. That was one of the hardest sessions I've ever battled. I played 12 hours. I was stuck, I think 11,000 at the low point. I almost got out of the hole. I think I was within like 3 or 4K, and then I got stuck 10K again, like 8 hours into it or something. And then to battle back and to win $840, maybe the most hard fought session I've ever played to win. $840, so ecstatic after a 12-hour session to get out of the hole and book a win for my first vlog here since becoming part of the ownership here. That's it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I'd appreciate it if you hit the like and subscribe buttons. Helps out the channel a ton. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to let me know in the comment section. I'm happy to get back to you. In the beginning of this episode, I went over my stats and I used the app PokerBase. I've been using it for 2.5 years. It's just super important to track your stats and your sessions and all that stuff if you're taking poker seriously. And for me, I use it for tax purposes and a variety of other things. But download that app. They just came out with a pro version with a lot more features. If you use the referral code BRAD10, you get 10% off. I'll put the link down below in the description box. And then we have our fall festival coming up on WPT Global, which is awesome. There's gonna be buy-ins of all different amounts, including a championship event at the end where if you win, you get your name on the Mike Sexton Champions Cup. That's something that's a huge goal of mine, so I'm gonna be firing. I have a link down below in the description box for that as well. But be sure to sign up to Global using the bonus code BRAD. That'll get you a deposit match bonus of up to $1,500 and more. Finally, the Lodge Championship Series is moving up a little bit. So it's gonna take place February 16th through March 3rd in 2025. Mark your calendars. We're probably gonna have a big meetup game to kick that series off, and it's just the biggest one of the year. There's a lot of big names that come in, and it's just a lot of fun. So if you're able to make it, I highly suggest checking out the lodge in Austin because it's a special place, man. All right, guys, hope you're all doing well. Hope you're staying safe. Good luck at the tables, and I'll see you next time.